how do you hide it from your roommates or family members, people living in the same house as you? How would you go about hiding it?
So this is tough, right? This is a good time for one of my friends. Ryan has this really good quote, and the quote is, "There's nothing sketchier than a sketchy guy acting sketchy." So the number one thing is to don't act sketchy. The number two thing is, if you're living with people who are like aware, you're probably gonna have a really tough time to hide it. I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's gonna be really tough. And one of the ways that people are doing it, and I kind of just discovered this when I was refreshing for this podcast, was they got these things called space buckets. Did you end up checking that website out?
Yep, I've heard of space buckets, and I saw that website you sent me.
I never heard of those, and I was looking at them, and there's a whole Reddit community about space buckets, and people are taking 5-gallon buckets, and they're just growing like one little plant in this 5-gallon bucket, and they've got they'll hook up a fan and a carbon filter to it and everything, and so I think that's an actual realistic way to grow at home without people you're living with noticing if you're gonna take a stab at it. But still, you might just have to trim and harvest somewhere else unless you can really figure out the carbon filter, negative pressure, or lung room type strategy for the odors. Other than the space buckets, back in the day there were these like fake computer boxes they used to sell. You remember those?
Oh yeah, yeah.
They didn't even come with a carbon filter. There was just like a regular computer fan on the back, and they just can't even imagine how many of those sold back in the day. But like even with something like that, like it's just gonna leak smell right out the back, and it's tough to control odors with a quiet fan too, right? Because the reason you got to use those inline fans with the carbon filters is because a regular like booster fan, a small quiet fan, doesn't have enough power to get the air through the carbon. The carbon restricts the airflow so much. That's why you got to use one of those powerful fans. So I would say this: if you know when someone at your house is going to be home, those are the times where you want your light off. You want your fan on a low setting, and those things go hand in hand, right? Because when your light's on, your fan usually has to be on at a higher setting to control the heat. When the light's off, you can keep the fan at a lower setting, so you're solving the light problem by just having it off during that time. You get the lower noise from the fan, but it's still on, so you get your negative pressure. If you're not using a space bucket or kind of some little homemade hidden thing, they've got like stealth closets and all this stuff that some of it's pretty gimmicky. But if you're gonna use a regular like 2x4 grow tent, maybe you can play it off as a clothing. It's just a portable clothing closet. I don't know how long you can get away with that for, but you can try the Ona blocks and stuff like that. But even that might be a little weird. Like, hey, why is our one roommate's room always smell like this weird block odor? So it's tough. Those are some things that you can do to make it easier. Reducing the amount of things that you're bringing in and out of the house. So like trying to reuse your soil or cocoa, buying things, keeping it small, buying things in small quantities, reusing your delivery boxes to put things in, so you can just waltz them in and it's not some like sketchy black garbage bag or whatever, things like that. You're not going to be able to, or you're going to have a really tough time trying to lug a CO2 tank by when you got roommates. So just keeping it small, and maybe this doesn't have to do with roommates, but you really have to be careful about who you tell and who you trust, right? Every friend has a friend that they tell your secrets to. I'm sure there's like a few friends in everyone's life where they can like absolutely trust, but for the most part, every best friend has a best friend, and secrets just get shared. So you really have to choose who you're telling about it. That's about it. And I guess the final kind of thing to talk about when it comes to roommates is are you a good roommate? are you being a good roommate to your roommates? Do you clean up after yourself? Do you respect them with not having it stinky and not being noisy or whatever? Like, it can go a long way, especially, you know, if say you are growing and your roommate eventually finds it, and you may not want to even do that without talking to them first. But if you already did and then they find out later and they're mad at you, that it might not be as bad if you were a good roommate beforehand. But if you're a pain in the butt and you don't have a good relationship with your roommates, and then they find out that you're growing in the closet, well, you're gonna be in trouble. So my note was to compromise, right? I think that's the best thing, if you can compromise with your roommates ahead of time and be honest and upfront with them, so you just don't have to hide it. It might be harder to do that with your mom or your family, but that's kind of my thought process on that. And same with neighbors, right? Like, if you're a good neighbor and you're nice and you're friendly, when something goes wrong or whatever, they get annoyed, maybe they're gonna come and knock on your door and give you a heads up before they do anything crazy, or, you know.
Good point. I know when it comes to keeping it stealth from family, friends, roommates, you know, people living with you, I know plenty of people have kind of built out sections in their closet. They built sections in their basement, in their attic, to where they've kind of boxed off areas, a garage as well, but they've really boxed off an area and made it so you can't really see there's a door anywhere, right? So like a stealth door that they're able to kind of open up and then get in there, and of course hiding the smell and light and all that stuff. But yeah, finding a section in the home to where you can kind of box off and prevent anybody from even realizing that there's an area there. I think that's probably one of the most common ways to hide it from family or roommates.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of a guy, a different guy from the grow shop, I had the pleasure of going to his house, and he had a workbench that he had built, you know, and it had a big giant back on it that he hung all his tools on, but it was on caster wheels. But the caster wheels were hidden with like a 2x6 in front of them, so you looking at it, you don't even know it's on wheels. But then he goes up to it, he pulls it, it opens up. Behind it is a poly zipper door, and boom, you walk in, and it's just like, whoa, dude! It was really cool, man. It's like some 007.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen so many creative things. I'm sure there's probably a whole Reddit section on keeping it stealth with gardening, I imagine, because people get creative, and it comes down to the DIY thing, like you mentioned before, kind of learning how to do things yourself.
It's fun, man. You know, like when I saw that door, I was like, are we going to Harry Potter land? Like, am I going to end up at like, what's on the other side here?
This clip is brought to you by Happy Hydro. For all your garden equipment needs, visit happyhydro.com, link is in the video description, and use the discount code MrGrowit.